Well, first off, I don't like the term rest in peace. I heard a better one years ago. It's like you should live in peace. Live in peace. If you can't live in peace, quote unquote, you can't live in quote unquote peace, then how can you rest in peace if you didn't live in peace? So so since they're no longer here, they're resting in peace. I doubt that if you didn't live in peace, that you rest in peace. So, to all of our lost ones and everyone who have passed on, and to everyone that will pass on, let's live in peace a little bit more. Chapter 8, the crematory of the system. And I'm going to give a warning here. This is extremely technical book, very wordy, and I don't know all the internal anatomy. So let's see here. The crematory of the system. The organs of respiration consist of the lungs and the air passages leading to them. The lungs are 2 in number and occupy the pleural chamber of the thorax, 1 on each side of the median line, being separated from each other by the heart, the greater blood vessels, and the larger air tubes. Each lung is free in all directions, except at the root, which consists chiefly of the bronchi, arteries and veins connecting the lungs with the trachea and heart. The lungs are spongy and porous, and their tissues are very elastic. They are covered with a delicately constructed but strong sac known as the pleural sac. One wall of which closely adheres to the lung, and the other to the inner wall of the chest, and which secretes a fluid which allows the inner surfaces of the walls to glide easily upon each other in the act of breathing. The air passages consist of the interior of the nose. The air passages consist of the interior of the nose. Pharynx, larynx, windpipe, or trachea, and the bronchi tubes. When we breathe, we draw in the air through the nose, in which it is warmed by contact with the mucous membrane, which is richly supplied with blood. And after it has passed through the pharynx and larynx, it passes to the trachea or windpipe, which subdivides into numerous tubes called the bronchi tubes, which in turn subdivide into and terminate in minute subdivisions all the small air spaces in the lungs, of which the lungs contain millions. A writer has stated that if air cells of the lungs were spread out over an unbroken surface, they would cover an area of 14,000 square feet. The air is drawn into the lungs by the action of the diaphragm, a great, strong, flat, sheet-like muscle stretched across the chest, separating the chest box from the abdomen. The diaphragm's action is almost as automatic as that of the heart, although it may be transformed into a semi-voluntary muscle by the effort of the will. When it relaxes, the chest and lungs contract, and the air is expelled from the lungs. Now, before considering what happens to the air in the lungs, let us look. Now, before considering what happens to the air in the lungs, let us take a little. Let us look into a little into the matter of the circulation of the blood. The blood, as you know, is driven by the heart, through the arteries, into the capillaries, thus reaching every part of the body, which it vitalizes, nourishes, and strengthens. Then it returns by means of the capillaries by another route, the veins, to the heart, from whence it is drawn to the lungs. The blood starts on its arterial journey, bright red and rich, laden with life-giving qualities and properties. It returns by the venous route, poor, blue, and dull, being laden down with the waste matter of the system. It goes out like a fresh stream from the mountain. It returns as a great stream of sewer water. This foul stream goes to the right article of the heart. When this auricle becomes filled, it contracts and forces the stream of blood through the opening of the right ventricle of the heart, which in turn sends it to the lungs, where it is distributed by millions of hair-like blood vessels. 1 second. Yeah. Gotta get a smoothie real quick. A little nourishment. Smoothie. A fruit and vegetable smoothie. Okay. So let's see here. The blood starts on its arterial journey, bright red and rich, laden with life-giving qualities and properties. It returns by the venous route, poor, blue, and dull, being laden down with the waste matter of the system. It goes out like a fresh stream from the mountains. It returns as a stream of sewer water. This foul stream goes to the right auricle of the heart. When this auricle becomes filled, it contracts and forces the stream of blood through an opening in the right ventricle of the heart, which in turn sends it on to the lungs, where it is distributed by millions of hair-like blood vessels to the air cells of the lungs, of which we have spoken. Oh, interesting. Wow. The lungs are like a fucking filtering system. I mean, the whole system is like a filtering system. Wow, that's pretty fucking nuts. Now let us take up the story of the lungs at this point. The foul stream of blood is now distributed among the millions of tiny air cells in the lungs. A breath of air is inhaled, and the oxygen in the air comes in contact with the impure blood through the thin walls of the hair-like blood vessels of the lungs, which walls are thick enough to hold the blood, but thin enough to admit the oxygen to penetrate them. When the oxygen comes in contact with the blood, a form of combustion takes place, and the blood takes up oxygen and releases carbonic acid gas generated from the waste products and poisonous matter which has been gathered up by the blood from all parts of the system. The blood, thus purified and oxygenated, is carried back to the heart. Nice. Again, rich. red and bright, and laden with life-giving properties and qualities. Upon reaching the left auricle of the heart, it is forced into the left ventricle, from whence it is again forced out through the arteries on its mission of life to all parts of the system. It is estimated that in a single day of 24 hours, 35,000 pints of blood traverse the capillaries of the lungs. The blood corpuscles passing in single file and being exposed to the oxygen of the air on both of their surfaces. Oh, okay. When one considers the minute details of the process alluded to, he is lost in wonder and admiration at nature's infinite care and intelligence. Yeah, dude, the body and nature, the environment, it is quite fucking extraordinary. It will be seen that unless fresh air in significant quantities reaches the lungs, the foul. That's why, like, reading this, I would rather be reading this outside in the fresh air in the sun. But since I actually care about people getting 100-year-old information, I have to read it here online. I guess that's just how I am. I sacrifice things. I sacrifice fresh air so you can hear this 100-year-old and rare information. I don't get any thanks, but you know how it is. It will be seen that unless fresh air in significant quantities reaches the lungs, the foul stream of venous blood cannot be purified, and consequently not only is the body thus robbed of nourishment, but the waste products, which should have been destroyed, are returned to the circulation and poison the system, and death ensues. Jesus! I'm going outside after this and breathing some fresh air. Impure air acts in the same way, only in a lessened degree. Impure area. It will also be seen that if one does not breathe in a sufficient quantity of air, the work of the blood cannot go on properly, and the result is that the body is insufficiently nourished and disease ensues, or a state of imperfect health is experienced. The blood of one who breathes improperly is, of course, of a bluish dark color, lacking in the rich redness of the pure arterial blood. This often shows itself in a poor complexion. Whew. Proper breathing and a consequent good circulation results in a clear, bright complexion. A little reflection will show the vital importance of correct breathing. If the blood is not fully purified by the regenerative process of the lungs, it returns to the arteries in an abnormal state, insufficiently purified and imperfectly cleansed of the impurities which it took upon its return journey. These impurities, if returned to the system, will certainly manifest in some sort of form of disease, either in a form of blood disease or some disease resulting from impaired functioning of some insufficiently nourished organ or tissue. The blood, when properly exposed to the air in the lungs, not only has its impurities consumed and parts with its noxious carbonic acid gas, but it also takes up and absorbs a certain quantity of oxygen which it carries to all parts of the body, where it is needed in order that nature may perform her processes properly. When nature comes in contact with the blood, it unites with the hemoglobin of the blood and is carried to every cell, tissue, muscle, and organ, which it invigorates and strengthens, replacing the worn-out cells and tissue by new materials with which nature converts to her use. Arterial blood, properly exposed to the air, contains about 25% of free oxygen. Not only is every part vitalized by the oxygen, but the act of digestion depends materially upon a certain amount of oxygenation of the blood, and thus is only accomplished by the oxygen of the blood coming in contact with the food and producing a certain form of combustion. It is therefore necessary that a proper supply of oxygen be taken through the lungs. This accounts for the fact that weak lungs and poor digestion are so often found together. To grasp the excuse me, to grasp the full significance of this statement, one must remember that the entire body receives nourishment from the food assimilated, and that imperfect assimilation always means an imperfectly nourished body. Even the lungs themselves depend upon the same source for nourishment. Even the lungs themselves depend upon the same source for nourishment. And, and if through imperfect breathing the assimilation becomes imperfect and the lungs in turn become weakened, they are rendered still less able to perform their work properly. And so in turn the body becomes further weakened. Every particle of food and drink must be oxygenated before it can yield us the proper nourishment, and before the waste products of the system can be reduced to the proper condition to be eliminated from the system. Lack of sufficient oxygen means imperfect nutrition, imperfect elimination, and imperfect health. Verily, breath is life. The combustion arising from the change in the waste products generates heat and equalizes the temperature of the body. Good breathers are not apt to take cold, and they generally have plenty of good warm blood, which enables them to resist the changes in the outer temperature. In addition to the above-mentioned important processes, the act of breathing gives exercise to the internal organs and muscles. Which feature is generally overlooked by the Western writers on this subject, but which the yogis fully appreciate. Let me say that again. In addition to the above-mentioned important processes, the act of breathing gives exercise to the internal organs and muscles, which further is generally overlooked by Western writers on the subject, but which the yogis fully appreciate. In imperfect or shallow breathing, only a portion of the lung cells are brought into play, and a great portion of the lung capacity is lost. The system suffering in proportion to the amount of under-oxygenation. The lower animals in their native state breathe naturally, and primitive man undoubtedly did the same. The abnormal manner of living adopted by civilized man or modern man, the shadow that follows upon civilization, has robbed us of our natural habit of breathing, and the race has greatly suffered thereby. Man's only physical salvation is to get back to nature. Chapter 8, Nourishment. Speaking of nourishment, let me get some good vegetables and fruit in me. One second. Hey, what's up, 5 viewers? Could you like and share this? I'd appreciate that. Let me check the chat room. Yo, what's up, Dan? Yeah, dude, don't smoke cigarettes, dude. Cigarettes are for fucking idiots. Honestly, there's a lot of flat earthers that smoke cigarettes, and there's a lot of flat earthers that I respect that smoke cigarettes, but I lose respect for flat earthers that smoke cigarettes. It's just how it is. Just like I lose a little respect for a flat earther who considers themselves any religion besides the Church of the Subgenius, besides the Subgenius. I mean, because I mean, I just lose. I just if you're there's no such thing as I know that there people claim to be flat Earth atheists, like an atheist flat earther. Like I know that people claim to be atheists, but like flat earthers claim to be atheists, but they're not. They're just liars. They're fakers. Like there's no such thing as an atheist flat earther. I know that people say that they're an atheist and they're flat earther, just like men say that they're women, and women say that they're men, and white people say that they're black people, and that's how they identify. That's cool. I understand that you identify as an atheist flat earther, but that's you know you're still a globehead in disguise. You can't trick me. You can't trick me. You can try, but it's not going to work. I have an eye. Two here, two to look, and one to see. Chapter 8, Nourishment. The human body is constantly undergoing change. Atoms of bone, tissue, flesh, muscle, fat, and fluids are constantly being worn out and removed from the system. Sorry, let's see here. The human body is constantly undergoing change. Atoms of bone, tissue, flesh, muscle, fat, and fluids are constantly being worn out and removed from the system, and new atoms are constantly being manufactured in the wonderful laboratory of the body, and then sent to take place. Sorry, I'm thinking about basketball right now. I was like reading, and I'm like, all right, I'm definitely gonna go outside and in the sun, take my shirt off, breathe some fresh air, play some basketball, and do some push-ups, do some running. I've been getting in better shape lately, that's for sure. I want to do some fucking push-ups. So let's see here. Sorry, I'm gonna pay attention. There's only this is a pretty short chapter. It's only like 4 pages. So here goes. I'm gonna end this live feed after this and go play some basketball outside, breathe some fresh air, and enjoy the sun. So, okay. So the human body is constantly undergoing change. Atoms of bone, tissue, flesh, muscle, fat, and fluids are constantly being worn out and removed from the system, and new atoms are constantly being manufactured in the wonderful laboratory of the body, and then sent to take place of the worn out and discarded material. Let us consider the physical body of man and its mechanism as a plant, and indeed it is akin to the life of a plant in its nature. What does the plant require to bring it up from seed to sprout, from sprout to plant, with flower, seed, and fruit? The answer is simple: fresh air, sunlight, water, and nourishing soil. These things, and all of them, must it have in order to grow to healthy maturity. And man's physical body requires just the same things, all of them in order to be healthy, strong, and normal. Remember the requisites: fresh air, sunlight, water, and food. We will consider the matter of air, sunlight, and water in other chapters, and we'll consider the matter of nourishment, nourishing food first. Just as the plant grows slowly but steadily, so does this great work of discarding worn-out material and the substitution of new material go on constantly, day and night. We are not conscious of this mighty work, as it belongs to the great subconscious part of man's nature. It is a part of the work of the instinctive mind, the whole of the body and all its parts. depend on health, strength, and vigor upon this constant renewal of material. If this renewal were stopped, disintegration and death would ensue. The replacing of the worn out and discarded material is an imperative necessity of our organism, and therefore is the first thing to be considered when we think of the healthy man. The keynote of the subject of food in the Hatha Yoga philosophy is the Sanskrit word, the English equivalent of which is nourishment. We print the word in capital letters that it may make an impression upon your minds. We wish our students to associate the thought of food with the thought of nourishment. To the yogi, food does not mean something to tickle the abdomen palate, but instead means first nourishment, second nourishment, and third nourishment. Nourishment first, last, and always. To many of the Western people, the ideal yogi is a lean, lank, scrawny, half-starved, emasculated being who thinks so little of food that he goes for days without eating, one who considers food to be too material for his spiritual nature. Nothing can be further from the truth. The yogis, at least those who are well-grounded in Hatha Yoga, regard nourishment as his first duty towards his body. And he is always careful to keep that body properly nourished and to see that the supply of new, fresh material is always at least equal to the worn out and discarded material. Interesting. It is quite true that the yogi is not a gross eater, nor is he inclined to rich and fancy dishes. On the contrary, he smiles at the folly of such things and goes on his plan. He goes to his plan and nourishing meal. He goes to his plain and nourishing meal, knowing that he will obtain there full nourishment without the waste and harmful matter contained in the more elaborate dishes of his brother, who is ignorant of the real meaning of food. The maxim of Hatha Yoga is, it is not what a man eats, but the amount that he assimilates that nourishes him. There is a world of wisdom in this old maxim, and it contains that which writers upon health subjects have taken volumes to express. We will show you later on the yogi method of extracting the maximum amount of nourishment from the minimum amount of food. The yogi method lies in the middle of the road, the two opposites of the road which are traveled, respectively, but the two differing Western schools, namely the food stuffers and the starvationists, each of whom loudly proclaim the merits of their own cult and decry the claims of the opposing sect. The simple yogi may be pardoned for smiling good-naturedly at the disputes raging between those two, the starvationists and the food stuffers, who, preaching the necessity of sufficient nutrition, teach that stuffing is necessary to attain it, on the one hand, and that those of the opposing school who, recognizing the folly of stuffing and overeating, have no remedy to offer but an anti-starvation, or semi-starvation, accompanied with long-continued fasts, which, of course, has brought many of its followers down to weakened bodies, impaired vitality, and even death. To the yogi, the evils of malnutrition on the one hand and overeating on the other do not exist. These questions have been settled for him centuries ago by the old yogi fathers, whose very names have been almost forgotten by their followers of today. Remember now, please, once and for all, that Hatha Yoga does not advocate the plan of starving oneself, but on the contrary, knows and teaches that no human body can be strong and healthy unless it is properly nourished by sufficient food eaten and assimilated. Many delicate, weak, and nervous people owe their impaired vitality and diseased condition to the fact that they do not obtain sufficient nourishment. Remember also that Hatha Yoga rejects as ridiculous the theory that nourishment is obtained from stuffing, gorging, or overeating, and views with wonder and pity these attributes of the glutton, and sees nothing in these practices but the manifestation of the attributes of the unclean swine, utterly unworthy of the developed man. To the yogi, understanding man should eat to live, not live to eat. The yogi is an epicure rather than a gourmand. For while eating the plainest food he has cultivated and encouraged his natural and normal taste, so that his hunger imparts to these simple viands a relish sought after, but not obtained by those who hunt after rich and expensive triumphs of the chef. While eating for nourishment as his main object, he maintains to make his food yield him a pleasure unknown to his brother, who scorns the simple fare. In our next chapter, we will take up the subject of hunger and appetite, two entirely different attributes of the physical body. Hunger and appetite. Although to most persons, the two appear to mean almost the same thing. So that's chapter 9, hunger and appetite. All right, well, I guess that's it. I'll read that later. All right, well, stop smoking cigarettes and stop taking offense to everything that you hear. Stop thinking that you're such a self-important person that you take every single thing that you hear from somebody else personally. Stop taking opinions and statements of other people personally. It will help you achieve peace, quote unquote, peace in your daily life and daily living practices of everyday mundane living, which we are all a part of. So have a nice weekend.